The year is 1914. Europe, a continent teeming with ambition and entangled in a web of alliances, teeters on the brink of catastrophe. Nationalism surges, empires clash, and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo ignites a powder keg. Austria-Hungary, seeking retribution, issues an ultimatum to Serbia, triggering a chain reaction of declarations of war. Germany, bound by treaty to Austria-Hungary, declares war on Russia and France, its forces surging through neutral Belgium in a bid to encircle Paris. Great Britain, its imperial interests threatened, joins the fray, declaring war on Germany. The Great War, a conflict that would reshape the political landscape of the 20th century, had begun. The Netherlands' decision to declare neutrality was deeply rooted in its history and national identity. Since the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, the Netherlands had pursued a policy of peace and non-intervention in European conflicts. This stance had served the nation well, allowing it to focus on its economic development and maintain its independence. The Dutch government believed that by remaining neutral, it could best protect its interests and avoid being drawn into the escalating conflict. Moreover, the Netherlands was acutely aware of its vulnerable geographic position. Sandwiched between Germany, a major belligerent, and Great Britain, a powerful naval force, the Dutch feared that taking sides would inevitably invite invasion and occupation. Neutrality, they reasoned, offered the best hope of preserving their sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, maintaining neutrality in a world consumed by war would prove to be a daunting challenge. The Netherlands, though determined to remain aloof from the conflict, would soon find itself grappling with the economic, social, and political ramifications of a war that respected no borders. The influx of refugees, the disruption of trade, and the constant threat of entanglement in the conflict would test the limits of Dutch neutrality and resilience. The outbreak of World War I sent shockwaves across the globe, disrupting international trade and plunging the world into economic uncertainty. The Netherlands, heavily reliant on international commerce, found itself caught in the crossfire. The North Sea, once a vital artery for Dutch trade, was transformed into a perilous battleground, patrolled by warships and menaced by submarines. Dutch merchant ships, carrying vital goods and raw materials, were increasingly at risk of attack or seizure by the warring powers. The war also led to a severe disruption in the supply of essential goods, as the Netherlands relied heavily on imports for food, fuel, and raw materials. The British blockade of German ports, while intended to cripple the German war effort, also had a devastating impact on neutral countries like the Netherlands. Food prices soared, shortages became commonplace, and the Dutch people faced increasing hardship. As the war raged on, the Netherlands found itself increasingly isolated on the world stage. Its traditional trading partners were at war, its neutrality was constantly tested, and its people struggled to cope with the economic and social consequences of a conflict that had engulfed Europe. The Dutch, once content in their neutrality, began to question the true cost of peace in a world at war. At the heart of the Netherlands' economic woes lay the devastating disruption of its international trade. As a small nation with a limited resource base, the Netherlands had long relied on its geographic location and maritime prowess to establish itself as a hub of global commerce. Dutch merchant ships, laden with goods from across the world, crisscrossed the seas, connecting distant markets and fueling the nation's prosperity. However, the outbreak of war brought this bustling trade to a grinding halt. The North Sea, once a testament to Dutch maritime dominance, transformed into a treacherous battleground. The British Grand Fleet, determined to strangle the German war effort, imposed a tight blockade on German ports, effectively cutting off the Netherlands' primary trading partner. Dutch ships, venturing into these contested waters, faced the constant threat of attack or seizure by British warships enforcing the blockade. The impact on the Dutch economy was immediate and severe. Exports plummeted as Dutch goods piled up on the docks, unable to reach their intended destinations. Imports, crucial for sustaining the nation's industries and feeding its population, dwindled to a trickle, sending shockwaves through the economy. The once bustling ports of Rotterdam and Amsterdam, once teeming with ships from every corner of the globe, fell eerily silent, their wharves deserted, their cranes idle. The lifeblood of the Dutch economy, the free flow of goods and services across international borders, had been severed, leaving the nation teetering on the brink of economic crisis. As the war dragged on and the grip of the Allied blockade tightened, the Netherlands found itself increasingly starved of essential goods. Foodstuffs, fuel, raw materials, all became scarce commodities, their prices skyrocketing as desperate consumers competed for dwindling supplies. The Dutch government, faced with a growing crisis, was forced to take drastic measures. Rationing, a wartime necessity in many belligerent nations, was introduced in the Netherlands, a stark reminder that even neutral countries were not immune to the war's privations. Long queues became a common sight outside bakeries and grocery stores as people patiently awaited their meager rations of bread, sugar, and other staples. The shortages extended far beyond food. Coal, essential for heating homes and powering factories, became increasingly difficult to obtain. The harsh winters of 1916 and 1917 brought untold misery as people struggled to stay warm in their poorly heated homes. Factories, starved of raw materials and fuel, were forced to curtail production, leading to widespread unemployment. The economic hardships of the war fell disproportionately on the poor and working class. While the wealthy could afford to pay exorbitant prices for scarce goods on the black market, the less fortunate were left to contend with empty cupboards and the gnawing pangs of hunger. The scarcity of goods and the disruption of trade had a cascading effect on the Dutch economy. Inflation, a silent thief, eroded the value of the Dutch guilder, making it increasingly difficult for ordinary people to afford even the most basic necessities. Wages, slow to adjust to the wartime realities, failed to keep pace with the spiraling cost of living, further exacerbating the plight of the working class. Unemployment soared as factories, starved of raw materials and faced with declining demand, were forced to lay off workers. Shipyards, once bustling with activity, fell silent as orders for new ships dried up. The once thriving tourism industry, a major source of revenue for the Netherlands, collapsed as foreign visitors, deterred by the war, stayed away in droves. The Dutch government, faced with mounting economic woes, struggled to find solutions. Public debt soared as the government borrowed heavily to finance relief efforts and maintain social order. The war, once a distant conflict, had become an economic maelstrom, threatening to engulf the Netherlands in its vortex. While many in the Netherlands endured hardship and deprivation, the war also created opportunities for economic opportunism and profiteering. Some businesses, sensing a chance to profit from the wartime shortages, stockpiled essential goods, driving up prices and exacerbating the plight of ordinary citizens. The black market flourished as unscrupulous individuals exploited the situation, selling rationed goods at exorbitant prices. Smuggling, particularly across the porous border with Germany, became rampant as people sought to profit from the price differentials between the two countries. This wartime profiteering created deep social divisions within Dutch society. Resentment grew towards those who were perceived to be enriching themselves at the expense of the nation's suffering. The war, once a unifying force, now threatened to tear apart the very fabric of Dutch society. As the German war machine rumbled across the Belgian border in August 1914, it unleashed a humanitarian crisis. Belgian civilians fled their homes in terror, seeking refuge from the advancing German army. The neutral Netherlands emerged as a beacon of hope for these desperate souls. The influx of refugees into the Netherlands soon swelled into a tidal wave. By the end of 1914, over 1 million Belgians had crossed the border into the Netherlands. These refugees arrived at the Dutch border exhausted and traumatized. The Dutch government responded with remarkable compassion and efficiency. Emergency reception centers were hastily established near border towns. Dutch citizens opened their homes and hearts to the refugees. The exodus of Belgian refugees into the Netherlands stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of war. The Dutch response serves as a testament to the enduring power of human compassion. The massive influx of Belgian refugees presented the Netherlands with an unprecedented logistical challenge. providing food, shelter, and medical care for over 1 million displaced people, even temporarily, would strain the resources of even the most prosperous nation. The Dutch government, working in tandem with aid organizations and countless volunteers, embarked on a monumental effort to house and assist the refugees. Temporary refugee camps, consisting of tents, barracks, and requisitioned buildings, sprang up across the country, offering rudimentary accommodation for the displaced masses. These camps, while providing basic necessities, were often overcrowded, lacking in privacy, and prone to outbreaks of disease. The Dutch government, acutely aware of the inadequacy of these temporary solutions, sought more permanent housing arrangements for the refugees. Empty houses, schools, and other suitable buildings were repurposed as refugee housing, providing a semblance of normalcy and stability for those who had lost their homes. Dutch families, their generosity undeterred by the hardships of war, continued to open their doors to refugees, sharing their homes and often meager resources with those in need. The task of feeding and clothing over 1 million refugees placed an immense strain on the Dutch economy, already grappling with the effects of war-induced shortages. Food rationing, already in place for the Dutch population, was extended to the refugees, ensuring that everyone received their fair share, albeit often meager, of essential foodstuffs. Clothing donations poured in from across the country, providing warmth and dignity to those who had arrived with little more than the clothes on their backs. Over 1 million Belgian refugees arrived, profoundly impacting Dutch society. This influx led to social and cultural friction, testing Dutch tolerance. Language barriers and cultural differences caused misunderstandings and tensions. Yet, cooperation and understanding emerged, enriching Dutch society. Belgian culture, cuisine, and art found new audiences in the Netherlands. The crisis strengthened Dutch compassion and resilience, leaving a legacy of empathy. The Netherlands' steadfast commitment to neutrality, while a cornerstone of its foreign policy, did not shield it from the deep social and political divisions that World War I ignited across Europe. The Dutch people, though spared the horrors of trench warfare, found themselves increasingly polarized as the war raged on, their loyalties tested, their allegiances questioned. Public opinion, initially united in its support for neutrality, gradually fragmented as the war dragged on. The Dutch, bombarded with propaganda from both sides, found themselves torn between sympathy for their beleaguered Belgian neighbors and a pragmatic understanding of their own vulnerability should they anger the German war machine. The political landscape reflected this growing divide. Socialist parties, traditionally opposed to war, faced internal strife as some members argued for actively supporting the Allied cause, while others clung to the principles of pacifism and non-intervention. Conservative factions, wary of German expansionism, increasingly viewed the Allies as a bulwark against German aggression. Their calls for increased military preparedness, finding a receptive audience among those who feared for the nation's security. The strain of maintaining neutrality in a world consumed by war took its toll on Dutch society. Suspicion and mistrust poisoned public discourse, as accusations of disloyalty and foreign sympathies were readily leveled against those who dared to express dissenting views. The war, once a distant conflict, had infiltrated the very fabric of Dutch society, testing the limits of its unity and resilience. The Netherlands' precarious neutrality, wedged between belligerent powers, made it fertile ground for espionage and covert operations. Both the Allied and Central Powers recognized the strategic importance of the Netherlands, its ports, its communication networks, and its access to vital resources, making it a valuable prize in the shadow war. Foreign spies, operating under the cover of diplomatic immunity or assuming false identities, infiltrated Dutch society, seeking to gather intelligence, disrupt enemy operations, and sway public opinion. Dutch citizens, their loyalties divided, sometimes found themselves caught in the crossfire, their patriotism questioned, their motives scrutinized. The Dutch government, acutely aware of the threat posed by espionage, expanded its intelligence gathering capabilities and tightened border controls. Suspected spies, their covers blown, were arrested and expelled, their clandestine activities exposed in sensational newspaper headlines that fueled public anxieties. The constant threat of espionage and subversion cast a long shadow over Dutch society. Trust, once an implicit aspect of social interactions, eroded under the weight of suspicion. Neighbors eyed each other warily, colleagues whispered secrets behind closed doors, and the once vibrant public sphere became increasingly polarized, its discourse tainted by fear and mistrust. Queen Wilhelmina, ascending the throne at 10, became a symbol of Dutch resilience during World War I. Her neutrality earned respect, but also criticism, especially due to her German ancestry. Despite this, she remained a steadfast symbol of national unity. Queen Wilhelmina's visits to the front lines and her speeches bolstered the morale of the Dutch people. Her presence was a unifying force, bringing together a nation divided by war and political tensions. Through her diplomatic efforts, she maintained the Netherlands' neutral stance, navigating complex international relations. Her personal sacrifices and commitment to her country endeared her to many, solidifying her legacy as a symbol of unity amidst contention. The Dutch military, under her guidance, fortified borders to prevent incursions, showcasing a delicate balance of defense and diplomacy. Internationally, her stance was both praised and scrutinized, with some viewing it as a beacon of peace, while others saw it as passive. Her radio addresses were pivotal in keeping the Dutch populace informed and united, reinforcing her role as a central figure in the nation's wartime narrative. The Netherlands' neutrality required military preparedness. The Dutch armed forces, though modest, symbolized national resolve. The government implemented extensive measures to fortify the nation's defenses, including the construction of bunkers and the mobilization of reserves. Public sentiment was a mix of anxiety and determination. Newspapers frequently reported on the war's progress and the importance of maintaining neutrality. The Dutch people united, bracing for a conflict they hoped to avoid. Families prepared by stockpiling supplies and participating in civil defense efforts. The military conducted regular training exercises to ensure readiness. Defensive lines were constructed along key points, and observation posts were manned to monitor any potential threats. The Dutch Red Cross played a crucial role, organizing medical supplies and training volunteers to assist in case of emergencies. Government officials held frequent meetings to discuss defense strategies and ensure that all regions were adequately protected. Schools conducted air raid drills, teaching children emergency procedures to follow in case of an attack. Communities came together to build shelters and reinforce homes, demonstrating a collective effort to safeguard the nation. Dutch soldiers patrolled the borders vigilantly, setting up barbed wire defenses to prevent any incursions. Military drills included practicing trench warfare techniques, reflecting the lessons learned from the ongoing conflict in Europe. Dutch engineers were instrumental in constructing fortifications and laying mines to deter any potential invaders. Despite the looming threat, the nation remained steadfast in its commitment to peace. The Dutch government modernized its military in response to war. Conscription increased, and new units were formed with advanced weaponry. Investments in logistics and communication were essential for rapid deployment. Extensive military drills were conducted to ensure readiness. Fortifications were built along key borders. Civil defense strategies included training civilians in emergency response and air raid precautions. The government allocated significant funds to bolster military infrastructure and medical preparedness. Trenches and bunkers were constructed to protect against potential invasions. The Dutch Red Cross played a crucial role in preparing for mass casualties and providing medical training to civilians. War mobilization impacted Dutch society deeply. Factories shifted to war production and rationing became common. The Dutch people showed resilience, united in safeguarding their neutrality. Dutch soldiers, though not engaged in combat, remained vigilant, patrolling borders and ensuring the nation's safety. Families faced hardships, with many enduring severe shortages of food and essential goods. The Dutch Red Cross played a crucial role, providing medical aid and support to those affected by the war. Personal stories reveal the sacrifices made, like that of a factory worker named Jan, who worked tirelessly to support the war effort despite the rationing. Letters from citizens recount the daily struggles and the spirit of solidarity that kept the nation strong. The Dutch government also faced immense pressure, balancing diplomatic relations while maintaining neutrality. Despite the challenges, the Netherlands managed to stay out of direct conflict, showcasing the nation's commitment to peace and stability. Dutch neutrality was a delicate balancing act during World War I. The government maintained strict impartiality amidst accusations from both sides. Diplomatic efforts emphasized adherence to international law. The Netherlands faced immense pressure from both the Allies and the Central Powers. They had to navigate blockades, trade restrictions, and espionage accusations. Dutch diplomats worked tirelessly to ensure that their country remained a neutral haven amidst the chaos. The Dutch government also had to manage internal challenges, such as maintaining public order and ensuring the flow of essential goods. They implemented strict border controls to prevent smuggling and espionage. Despite the immense pressure, the Netherlands managed to avoid direct involvement in the conflict. Their success in maintaining neutrality was a testament to their skillful diplomacy and unwavering commitment to peace. The Dutch government worked tirelessly to counter suspicion and maintain neutrality. Strict controls on trade and welcoming refugees demonstrated impartiality. Queen Wilhelmina's public neutrality reinforced the nation's stance. Key diplomatic events included negotiations with both the Allies and Central Powers to ensure Dutch sovereignty. The Netherlands' efforts to mediate and maintain open communication channels were crucial in preserving their neutral position. The Dutch Red Cross played a significant role in providing humanitarian aid, further solidifying the country's neutral and humanitarian image. Dutch media also contributed by consistently reporting on the nation's neutral stance and diplomatic efforts. The Dutch military maintained a defensive posture, ready to protect the nation's borders without engaging in the conflict. Trade agreements were carefully managed to avoid favoring any side, ensuring economic neutrality. Internationally, the Dutch government engaged in continuous dialogue to build trust and credibility, ensuring their neutrality was respected. The Hague became a center for peace efforts during the war. In 1915, the Women's Peace Conference was held in The Hague, bringing together women from warring and neutral nations to advocate for peace. The Dutch Red Cross played a crucial role in providing humanitarian aid to war victims, showcasing the nation's commitment to alleviating suffering. The city also hosted numerous diplomatic meetings, reaffirming its reputation as a hub for diplomacy. These conferences and humanitarian efforts highlighted the Netherlands' dedication to peace and diplomacy during a time of global conflict. The International Peace Bureau, established in The Hague, worked tirelessly to mediate conflicts and promote disarmament. In 1916, the International Congress of Women convened in The Hague, further solidifying the city's role as a beacon of peace. The Netherlands also provided refuge and support to thousands of displaced individuals, emphasizing its humanitarian stance during the war. The Dutch government alleviated the suffering of prisoners of war. During World War I, prisoners faced severe hardships, including overcrowded camps, inadequate food, and poor medical care. Negotiations and Red Cross efforts ensured humane treatment. The Dutch Red Cross played a crucial role in providing relief, delivering food parcels, clothing, and medical supplies to the camps. Special hospitals provided care for sick and wounded prisoners. These hospitals were equipped to handle various ailments and injuries, offering a respite from the harsh conditions of captivity. The Dutch efforts significantly improved the living conditions and morale of the prisoners, showcasing a commitment to humanitarian principles amidst the war. The Dutch government also collaborated with international Red Cross organizations to establish agreements that facilitated the exchange of information about prisoners and the delivery of relief packages. These agreements ensured that prisoners received regular updates from their families, which was crucial for maintaining their mental well-being. Additionally, the Dutch facilitated the exchange of letters between prisoners and their families, further easing the emotional burden of captivity. Through these comprehensive efforts, the Netherlands demonstrated a profound commitment to upholding humanitarian values during one of history's most challenging periods. Dutch humanitarian efforts during World War I left a lasting legacy. The nation's actions shaped its identity and commitment to refugee rights. The Netherlands emerged as a champion of international humanitarian law. The aid provided to refugees not only saved countless lives, but also set a precedent for future humanitarian efforts. These actions influenced Dutch policies, leading to a robust framework for refugee protection that persists to this day. During the war, the Dutch Red Cross distributed over 1.5 million food parcels and medical supplies to refugees. Dutch volunteers built numerous shelters and provided essential services to thousands of displaced individuals. The Dutch government's policies during WWI laid the groundwork for modern refugee protection laws. The legacy of Dutch aid during WWE is evident in the country's ongoing commitment to humanitarian causes worldwide. The First World War cast a long shadow over the Netherlands, testing its neutrality and resilience. Though spared physical devastation, the Netherlands faced economic hardship and social division. The influx of Belgian refugees ignited a spirit of compassion and generosity. The Netherlands emerged from the war forever changed. Its traditional neutrality now seemed precarious in a world of ideological conflict. The war exposed the nation's vulnerability, forcing a reassessment of its place in the world. Yet the Netherlands discovered a newfound sense of purpose and resilience. The war tested the nation's mettle, revealing its capacity for compassion and commitment to humanitarian principles. The Netherlands emerged stronger, determined to chart its own course in a world forever altered. The Dutch experience during World War I serves as a reminder that neutrality demands vigilance and resilience. It requires an unwavering commitment to peace, justice, and human dignity. The Netherlands emerged from the crucible of war with a renewed determination to contribute to a more peaceful and just world.